So to give a little bit of a backstory, none of my family is Christian, including my extended family. My whole family just kind of believes as long as you're a good person, as long as you try to do the right thing, that's kind of really all that matters. And so don't lie, don't steal, those types of things. But there was never really any talk of heaven or of Jesus growing up. And so I kind of always wondered, is there more to life than what we see? And I think I was around first grade. I had a glass of water next to my bed one night, and I said, I'm going to figure this out once and for all. And so I said, God, if you're real, tip this glass of water over, and then tomorrow morning I'll know if you're real or not. And so I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and the glass of water was still upright. And so I thought, what does this mean? Maybe it means that God doesn't like being tested, which is a fair thing, and I probably shouldn't be testing God then. Or maybe it means that God doesn't like making messes, which also seems kind of godly. And so that was a possibility. Or maybe it means that God's not real. And so it really answered none of my eternal questions about life. And I just kind of continued to go on with my life. And I continued to wonder, is there more to life than what we see? But as a first grader, it wasn't really on my mind very often. In addition to growing up in a home that wasn't Catholic or wasn't Christian, I also grew up in a very abusive environment. And so because of that, from a very, very early age, I began to believe a lot of lies about myself. From a very, very early age, I struggled a lot with disordered eating issues. And then as I got into middle school, I started to have self-injury patterns. And then when I got into high school was actually when I had my first suicide attempt. And I ended up in the intensive care unit for 3 days. And after I was in the ICU, I was transferred to a psychiatric unit of a hospital. And it was when I arrived to the psychiatric unit that I really completely broke down. And I felt so hopeless and so alone, and it just felt like there was no hope for me at all. And I don't know what it was with it. Now I know, but at the time I had no idea what it was within me. But there's something that was within me that told me I needed to pray. And I hadn't really done a lot of prayers in my life, but I'd seen it in TV shows. And so I got down next to my bed and folded my hands, and I just said, God, I don't know if you're real. I don't know anything about you, but I know I need your help to get through high school. Because at that point, getting through high school was the epitome of getting through. I think anyone who's been through abuse or been through high school can attest. It just feels like it'll be an eternity. And so I said that prayer, I said amen, and I didn't really expect a whole lot to come from it. But it was really at that point that God started to do a work in my life. And it wasn't overnight, but I started getting involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes at my school, and I was given my first Bible, and I started to read the Bible and learn about this God who loves me and this God who created me for a purpose, and there was a reason for my life. And so I started going to a Presbyterian church that I was invited to by some random stranger actually. And so I started to go, and it was there that I met this community of God, and I experienced love, and I experienced people who were excited to see me, and found such community there. And as good as that was, and as amazing as it was to know the truth that God had for me, I didn't know how to live out freedom in my life. And all these things I was learning were so great, but I didn't know how to apply those to my own life. I continued to struggle, and between the ages of about 14 till my early 20s, I had about a dozen suicide attempts. And I was constantly in and out of the hospital, and I just felt like I was hopeless. And I got into college, and I was actually randomly invited to go to a Catholic Newman Center, and I didn't know it was Catholic, so I agreed to go because I wouldn't have gone if I knew it was Catholic. But I went with this person, and there were 2 dogs that lived at the Newman Center, and so I actually kept going because of the dogs, because the people there were pretty nice, but I really like animals. And so I kept going, and as I went, I started to like the people there too. And so I got to know these people, and they seemed so smart, and they seemed like they really knew their faith. And so I didn't understand how they got wrapped up in Catholicism. And so finally, I made a bullet point list, because I'm very type A, and it was a whole list of why the Catholic Church was wrong. And I sat down with a couple of people from the Newman Center, and I said, why are you Catholic? Here are all the reasons why you guys are wrong. You could have a relationship with Jesus. Why are you choosing to be Catholic? And so that night, those 2 people went through bullet point by bullet point, and at the end of the conversation, I realized I had to become Catholic, because everything that I believed about the church was either something that the church doesn't teach, or it is something the church teaches, but it makes sense why they teach it. And so I went through the RCIA program at the Newman Center and became Catholic. And it was such a beautiful thing to find truth, because I'd always been seeking truth about myself. But to find this church that not only has truth about myself, but has truth about all of humanity and of the God who created humanity. And so I found such joy and such hope in the sacraments, but even amidst all of that joy and hope that I found, I couldn't really set myself free from all the things that I continued to struggle with. And so I was continuing to cut myself. I was continuing to have, these trips in and out of the psychiatric units, and I still just didn't know how to be free. And so somebody eventually ended up telling me about this program called Mercy Ministries. And it's a residential program for young women who are struggling with life-controlling issues. So whether that's unplanned pregnancies or cutting or suicide attempts or all of those different types of things. And so somebody told me about that, and I knew that I needed to apply because I knew I needed help. And so I applied for the program, I got in, and I was there for 8 months, and it's a residential program. You live there. I stayed there for 8 months, and it was there that God completely transformed my life around. And I just started to learn, these truths that weren't just a theory anymore. They were actual things that I could apply to my life, and I could replace all these lies that I had been told as a child and replace them with truth. And one of the Bible verses they talk a lot about at Mercy Ministries is, it's in Deuteronomy, and it says, "This day I set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your seed may live." And at that point, I thought, choose life, be willing to be alive. And so I thought, maybe someday I'll get to the point where I can be willing to be alive. But it also says in the Bible, Satan came to steal, kill, and destroy. And he had tried to do that in my life. He stole my childhood. He tried to destroy me. And he tried to kill me, and Jesus came for me to have life and have it to the full. And so that wasn't just me being willing to be alive. And so I wanted to have this life that had, love and joy and peace and patience and all the fruit of the Spirit. I wanted to have this life that was vibrant and that I would be able to help other people too. And as I started to replace all these lies with truth, I really began to have that freedom that Christ offers us. And I definitely don't live a perfect life now, but I'm able to live a life that does have joy, it does have peace, and I'm definitely beyond this point of just being willing to be alive. I'm so thankful for Christ and for Him setting me free. And I think the one thing I want to impart upon people is that what God did in my life, He can do in everyone's life. It's not just that He wanted to set me free, but we serve a God who's about setting captives free. And whether that's suicide attempts, or whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's unforgiveness, no matter what it is, that we have a God who wants to set you free from whatever you struggle with.